What happens now for the Director of Public Prosecutions? 1999, first woman to act in the position of Director. 2003, first appointed in the position of Senior DPP. And 2008, appointed DPP. Will the Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party challenge the latest ruling by the Supreme Court, or will the DPP walk? This evening, we arrest the issue at the forefront of the minds of many Jamaicans, following the ruling by the Supreme Court today that the second extension granted by the JLP administration for DPP Paula Llewellyn was unconstitutional. Her first extension in 2020 was met with pushback by then PNP leader Dr. Peter Phillips, and again in 2023 when for a second time an extension was granted. The PNP's Peter Bunting and Philip Polwell challenged that move, but join me at the desk as we begin Lead Story. I'm Nika Lewis, standing in for your regular host, George Davis, and this is Lead Story. This evening, we welcome our guests, Philip Polwell, leader of the opposition's business in the Parliament, and the PNP's lead attorney, King's Counsel Michael Hilton. Gentlemen, are you with us? We're joining them on Zoom.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, I hear you, Mr. Polwell. So perhaps I should start with you then. Is Mr. Hilton there? Indeed. Thank you, gentlemen.
I am. Are you hearing me?
Thank you so much. So I'll begin with Mr. Polwell. He is the first claimant on the matter. And so I'll say, Mr. Polwell, welcome again. Why was it deemed necessary to take this matter to the courts?
Okay. It was necessary because we believe that the government of the day has been, in not only this area, but other areas, tampering with our Constitution, has not been governing in the best way that it ought to. That this issue is a fundamental issue that we thought necessitated our pursuing it in this way. We have said time and time again, it really has nothing to do with the individual Miss Llewellyn. And in fact, it's really invidious that the government has put her in this position, her having served the country for so long. I have been a public servant myself, having served as trade administrator and head of the Patriot Commission. So I understand what she must be going through. But we had to go this route because it really is tampering with our democracy, and we couldn't stand for that.
All right, well, you've laid the foundation for me, so I'll introduce King's Counsel, Mr. Michael Hilton. Mr. Hilton, you are the PNP's lead attorney in this matter. Walk us through this case and the latest ruling. What does it mean? Because it seems there are varying interpretations on aspects of this ruling.
Yes, so I've learned this evening that there's a different interpretation. The law that Parliament passed had two sections that applied to the DPP. One changed the retirement age to 65, and the other gave the DPP the option, and the language was, to retire at any time after 60. In other words, she could retire past the original retirement date, up to 65. We argued in the case that the entire section, both of those sections, were unconstitutional. And then we argued in the alternative that you could keep the first section, that is to say, increase the age to 65, yes, generally, but hold that it doesn't apply to this DPP, and that second section that gave her the election should be struck down. The court agreed with that second option, and they held that the Parliament could not properly give the DPP the choice, the option to decide on an extension, when under the Constitution, that was, of course, a process that was in the hands of the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, and the Governor General. So that's the effect of your ruling. Right?
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to now bring your attention, Mr. King's Counsel Hilton, as well as Mr. Paulwell, but predominantly you, Mr. King's Counsel. It says at this section, I don't know if you want to call it a clause or section 6, but I'm saying it's section 6 of the ruling. It states that the DPP in February 2023 made an application for an extension in the role, and a letter was sent to her in May 2023 by the Public Service Commission saying there could be no further extension. It also cited that prior she had an extension as well, but it went on to state that the Prime Minister, having considered legal advice, had refused the extension. So how then did we get here?
Well, that is one of the main arguments we made in the case, that having gotten that legal advice, having indicated to her, to the DPP, that she could not get an extension, the next thing that happened was a bill was tabled in the House and passed the same day, effectively amending the Constitution to do just that. That was the complaint in the suit.
Mr. Paulwell, as a politician, you are looking on at the optics of this. It's not the first time around that the PNP has had to drag the Jamaica Labour Party to the courts over matters deemed unconstitutional in the end. Some you may have won, some you may have lost. But what does this say to the populace about the role of the opposition in such a state?
Right. Well, I think in the last 4 or so years, we have won everything, largely because the government has been very reckless in how it administers its function as a government, especially as it relates to the Constitution. And I suspect this won't be the end. There are some issues pending. For example, some of the experiences recently in Parliament, where an opinion was given by the Attorney General to the Speaker of the House, the Speaker representing the Parliament, which comprises all 63 of us, and that opinion is not shared with the members of the House. The issue of the tabling of reports from the Auditor General, these are issues that we believe as an opposition we have a duty to pursue. We really ought to ensure that the sanctity of the Constitution is preserved, and that is a specific role for the opposition.
Yes, were you through with that thought? Because you went into black a few seconds.
Right. So we see our role as very clear, that whenever the government does anything that affects our democracy, that is likely to breach a constitution, we have to be alert, we have to be vigilant, and we know where to get justice through our courts.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the implications now for the DPP, the incumbent DPP, if or can she remain in office, having heard this ruling today? Mr. Hilton, you first.
That's a very good question, Mr. Having seen the Attorney General's statement, I frankly don't know what is going to happen on Monday, what they envisage. I note the comment about appealing, which is, of course, the appropriate course. And I have no comment on ongoing appeal and what may happen there. But it does seem a little odd that, as I understand the statement, they're saying effectively they succeeded in the case, that the DPP, the incumbent DPP remains in office, has not been removed, and it's therefore not clear to me why they'd be appealing. So there is an unfortunate level of uncertainty right now, and I'm not sure where we're going.
Well, because you're still with us, I'm going to find out a little more about this now. The opposition says that it's a declaratory ruling. Could you expound on that? I don't know if you want to, or if you'd want to segue and allow Mr. Paulwell.
Mr. Hilton is my lawyer, so
yeah, let me explain.
For that.
So in another constitutional case recently, the court ruled that something was unconstitutional, and ordered the government to pay compensation to the claimant. So that's a type of a judgment. That's an order requiring the losing party to do something. Order doesn't do that. This order declares that something is unconstitutional. So it doesn't order the government to do anything. It just says what you did is unconstitutional, null and void. That's a declaratory judgment.
So can the execution of the ruling be stayed?
Well, you'll note that the Attorney General's statement doesn't say anything about stay. There's a good reason why.
Well, what's next, therefore? What are you anticipating? You mentioned the possibility of an appeal, and if so, how will or would you respond?
So, here's another alternative. And here is something that has been done in the past from time to time, and the government may want to consider. And obviously, I'm not advising the government. if you're uncertain about what a judgment means, you can ask the court. The court just made this judgment. They know what they meant. If you're unclear about what it means, you can ask them. So that's another option. But, to answer your question directly, if there was an appeal, I would seek the instructions of the claimants, and they would indicate whether they wish to contest the appeal. I would imagine they would.
Well, Mr. Paulwell, how far is the PNP willing to go if there's an appeal? Privy Council? We've gone there a few times for other matters, so I'm not sure if you're willing to take this one that far.
Well, again, we are the claimants. So we felt aggrieved on behalf of the Jamaican people. So we will have to pursue it to its ultimate. We believe that the decision today was straightforward, unambiguous, and we're very confident that if the government pursues it, ultimately we'll end up where we are today. Again, I have to make the point, because sometimes when there are contending issues, people view it in a personal way, and it is really not so. These are fundamental issues that affect our country, that affect our democracy, and we believe that it's incumbent on us to pursue them so that we can be guided by the courts. We have so been guided, and I think we'll have to move on now.
But we're still on the matter of Parliament, because this certainly in some way must impact how Parliament approaches certain matters going forward, given the government's majority and the way they may be able to push through some of these matters, as we've seen now. What does this really mean for the Parliament and how it operates?
I think the government has to be a lot more careful in how it uses its majority in the Parliament. I've said before that Constitution recognizes the role of the leader of the opposition, and an opposition can be 14 members or 31, but that due regard has to be taken of the role of the opposition, and that government ought not to, through arrogance, believe that it can govern on its own. There are ways around these issues. From time to time, these issues, what would normally happen is that in a sidebar, the two leaders will meet and discuss, and to see if these things can be resolved even without legislation. And if legislation is required, then there is consensus. But this government, and one of the reasons why I'm a claimant, when we were on a break, when we were told that we wouldn't have Parliament for a period of time, I traveled overseas. And it was during that time when I was overseas that the Parliament rushed in emergency session to pass this bit of legislation, which is to amend the Constitution. No regard for the attendance of members of the Parliament, more so myself as leader of opposition business. I was overseas when I got a call from the leader of government that they were going to summon Parliament for this purpose. And that is wrong.
All right, well, thank you so much. That was Mr. Philip Paulwell. He is the leader of opposition business in the lower house of Parliament. And we also have Mr. Michael Hilton. He's a King's Counsel, the lead attorney representing the opposition in the court on the matter pertaining to the tenure of the incumbent DPP, Paula Llewellyn. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. We take a quick break and then we go. Yes, sir?
I was just saying, you're welcome and good night.
Right. So we take a quick break, and after that we return with some remarks from the government minister, Minister of Justice Delroy Chuck, that was previously recorded, well, earlier today. Join us after this.
Hi, I'm Wayne.
And I'm Tammy.
And we are the Mitchells. You can watch Meet the Mitchells right here on CVM TV every Wednesday at 8 p.m.
Yes, you guys don't want to miss it. We will be having new episodes every week, so definitely follow along with our family.
Meet the Mitchell family.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
You're the sugar to my tea. Meet the Mitchell family.
My day has come, the race has begun. I've traveled the seas, I've traveled the waters. Once I was weak, now I'm much stronger. I've worked in the sun, look what I've become. I've conquered the beast, now I'm much greater. I've learned from a failure. Dedication, discipline and drive. Seizing every moment that comes up in this life.
Welcome back to Lead Story. We'll now go to an interview we recorded earlier with the Justice Minister, Delroy Chuck.
All right, firstly, Mr. Chuck, can you tell me what is your reaction to the ruling by the court today?
Well, it's mixed because the court ruled that the Constitutional Amendment Act was quite valid, the subsection 1. However, in the second part, it ruled that the application of the DPP to continue her tenure to the age of 65, based perhaps on subsection 2.2, was invalid and null and void. Truth of the matter is, having confirmed and validate the Act of Parliament that the DPP can go to the age of 65. Subsection 2, which the Constitutional Court ruled was invalid, null and void, was a provision for both the Auditor General and the DPP to protect them when they have reached the age of 60 to get their pension if they retire before the age of 65. So that removing or severing subsection 2 of the Constitutional Amendment Act, to my mind, does not invalidate the fact that the DPP, in my opinion, should be able to go and continue to age 65.
But the opposition is saying no, as they did back then when it was being debated in Parliament, that this is a convenient thing for the Andrew Holness government to do, suggesting that there is an ulterior motive for doing so.
Well, they should know, because in their tenure up to 2014, 2015, they are the ones who proposed that all public officers should retire at age 65. When I came in and I passed the Pension Act to allow all public officers to retire at age 65, from 2017, 2018, I had intimated, and I repeated that in Parliament, that we would, in short course, do the same for the DPP and the Auditor General. Why are they imputing this to the DPP and not to the Auditor General? Because the Act itself, pursuant to the Pension Act enacted in 2018, was to amend the Constitution to allow both public officers to retire at age 65. And this is exactly what the Constitutional Court has found to be valid, save and except the provision to protect both officers in the event that they want to retire before age 65, that they could get their full pension benefit, seems to have been struck, well, has been struck down by the Constitutional Court.
All right, so the government is saying that they will appeal, or it will appeal.
Well,
why is it important to appeal it?
Well, it is important to appeal because there needs to be some clarity in the judgment. Because the judgment itself is saying that the DPP and the Auditor General can continue to age 65. If you remove these two subsections, which allows the DPP and the Auditor General to elect to retire before age 65, to my mind, it does not affect the actual retirement age. What it affects is if they do retire before age 65, they may not get their full pension.
Would you accept the observation that having someone who is currently in office benefiting from the amendment to that legislation is somewhat a little bit untidy, if you could say that?
Well, it happens to everyone. All public servants benefited from the Pensions Act 2017, that they could go to age 65.
No, except this is a special case. Because
these two officers are constitutionally protected. So we had to go through the appropriate constitutional amendments, and the Constitutional Court accepted that we did go through the appropriate constitutional amendment. So to say that there's anything unusual about this constitutional amendment, it's just that it took too long to have been enacted.
All right, so the government says that it is going to be asking for a stay of execution immediately. But the opposition's argument is that this is a declaratory case or ruling. And so there is no room for the government to actually appeal this case because as it is right now, there is no Paula Llewellyn as the DP.
Well, with due respect, that's quite incorrect. In any event, we hope to file an appeal early next week and ask the Court of Appeal to indicate that the status quo remains until that declaratory declaration is determined by the Court of Appeal. In any event, there's no order in the judgment, as I'm seeing it, that the DPP should vacate her position. All that it has done is to say that subsection 2 is null and void. And to be frank with you, subsection 2 is to protect the DPP. So if you remove it, the age of retirement still remains at age 65, which they consider to be valid.
So if we look at this from a layman's point of view, the office of the DPP is one that should be above reproach.
Absolutely.
There should not be this cloud over the office. Isn't the right thing then for maybe the current occupier of the position to step down, just so that you can get rid of this ambiguity?
No, I am very disappointed that the opposition can be imputing in a different way that this professional, that is Paula Llewellyn, was acted into my mind professionally, open and transparent, that they're imputing in whichever way that she should not continue in office because of this court judgment. Now, in all my years, and I have been in practice, I've never found Paula Llewellyn to be anything but open, transparent, and professional. I cannot understand why the opposition is opposed to her.
So let me ask you this then, because it's been bandied about. They haven't come out and said it in any explicit way. But is it, or could it be, that the current government prefers to have Ms. Llewellyn in office for whatever reason?
No, let me be frank with you. One of the reasons for that subsection 2, I did not know if Paula Llewellyn or Pamela Monroe Ellis would have agreed to go beyond age 60 or 63 in the case of Paula Llewellyn. As far as I can see, it was a matter for them, but we enacted this legislation in pursuant of what we agreed to do after the Pensions Act of 2018. So this subsection 2 was basically to protect both of them. They could have retired. Ms. Llewellyn could have retired in September last year. And with the new legislation, if we did not have that subsection 2, there might be a question as to whether she would have got her full pension benefit. Now, we in the government have no reason to say Ms. Llewellyn should go out of office right now, to the best of my knowledge. She has very strong support at the Director of Public Prosecution's office, speaking as the Minister of Justice and seeing what the DPP has been doing. She has been doing a fantastic job. She works very hard to ensure that her prosecutors